I'd like to go over with you the Gemara in Shabbos regarding the Neiras Chanukah and speculate about what lies behind the some of the discussions in the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Huna, Psilois ushmonim, wicks and wicks and oils. She'amru Chachamim ein madlikin bohen b'Shabbos, that the Chachamim said we are not to use those on Shabbos because the wicks and the oils which are not effective, if you use them on Shabbos, then they will be problematic and people may be inclined to try to fix them. So we don't use, there's that whole Bamem leaking that we say but you say every Friday night during Kabbalah Shabbos, where it lists all of the different kinds of oils which are acceptable and not acceptable, the wicks, which materials are acceptable and are not acceptable. So those things which you cannot use on Shabbos, so Rav Huna says, Ein madlikin bein b'Chanukah, you can't use them on Chanukah, bein b'Shabbos, bein b'Chol, regardless of whether it's Shabbos Chanukah or it's in the weekday. You can't use any of those wicks and any of those oils which you can't use on Shabbos, you can't use for Chanukah Lech. Amar Rav, my time is Rav says, what's the reason for that? What's the reason of Rav Huna? Because somebody holds Kavsa Zakuk law. He holds that if the Chanukah candle goes out, if the flame goes out, if it's extinguished, that you're obligated to rekindle it. Therefore, both on Shabbos and during the week, we're concerned that if somebody were to use some sort of an inferior wick or an inferior oil, that he might not be have enough energy or enough inclination to rekindle it and change the oil and change the wick. So we say to him, don't use it in the first place, because we're concerned that he won't rekindle it, and it's obligatory according to Avuna that you do rekindle it. Secondly, a second reason, Umuta lishtamish la'ira, he holds that the Chanukah Lech, the light from the Chanukah Lech, is permissible to use it for any kind of personal use. So you could read by it, you could count your money by it. The light of the Chanukah candles is, in a certain sense, utilitarian. You can use it for whatever reason you want. Therefore, inasmuch as you can use it, so therefore on Shabbos we're concerned about the fact that you'll become engrossed in whatever it is that you're doing, and if it's the light isn't bright enough, you'll adjust it. So you can't use it. So therefore, he gives two reasons why you can't use it on Shabbos, which is one, that in general we're concerned about the fact that somebody is going to use an inferior wick or oil that it'll blow out and he won't be inclined to rekindle it. And second of all, on Shabbos there's an extra concern about the fact that since you're allowed to use the light for your own personal use, that inadvertently you'll become engrossed in something, reading or examining something, and as a result you'll adjust the light. Rav Chizda says, Madlikin ben b'choil. He argues you can use inferior oils and inferior wicks during the week, but not on Shabbos. Why? Because he has a little bit of a different opinion. His opinion is that if it goes out, you don't have to rekindle it. Therefore, I'm not concerned about the fact that on the weekday that he won't rekindle it because he doesn't have to rekindle it. On the other hand, not on Shabbos, because he holds Mutar L'Shtamish Leila, he says that you are allowed to use the light for your own personal use. Therefore, we're concerned you'll get engrossed in something and you'll adjust that. So you can't use it on Shabbos. So he says, Rav Huna says you can't use anything not on Shabbos, not on the weekday. And Rav Hizda says during the week you can, but you can't use it on Shabbos. Comes along, Zeir in the name of Master Rav, and he says all of the wicks and all of the oils which the Chachamim said you can't use on Shabbos, you may use for Chanukah, the Chanukah lights, both during the week and both on Shabbos. And the reason is because he holds Kovsa Ein Zokuk Lo, he holds that if the light goes out, if the flame is extinguished, you don't have to rekindle it. So I'm not concerned about the fact that he's going to be too lazy to rekindle because he doesn't have to. And on Shabbos, he's allowed to use it because he holds that you're not allowed to use the Chanukah Lech, the light from the candles is not permissible to use for your own personal use. Therefore, I'm not concerned that he's going to be reading or he's going to be examining the lettuce for bugs or whatever it is, and he's going to be so engrossed that he's going to inadvertently adjust it because he's not allowed to do those things. So, Rav's position is we're allowed to use the inferior oils and the inferior wicks both during the week and on Shabbos because we don't hold by the position that you have to rekindle it. And we're not allowed to use the light for our own personal use. Rashi says in the comment about the prohibition to enjoy the light for your own personal use, he says, in order that you should recognize that it is a ner mitzvah, that it is not just an ordinary candle or an ordinary flame, it's a flame of mitzvah, and we have to respect the fact that it's a ner mitzvah, so you can't use it for your own personal use. And that happens to be the halacha, that we are permitted to use. We do conclude, according to Rav, that the inferior wicks and inferior oils may be used both for the Chanukah light, not for the Shabbos light, but for the Chanukah light, both during the week and on Shabbos. The reason being, Kovsa Ein Zokuk Lo, you don't have to rekindle it, and it's also L'Shtamish Leila, you can't use it for your own personal use. And in that little paragraph that we recite after we kindle the Chanukah light, we say, these flames are holy. We do not have permission to use them. Exclusively just to look at them. That's the only thing we can do is to look at them. So I'm intrigued by the fact that they have these positions, and I would like to understand, at least in the measure that is accessible to some of us, what may be behind the positions that they're taking, whether it's Kosa Zokuk Lo, you are obligated, you're not obligated, you are permitted to use its light, not permitted to use its light. So I'd like to propose the following, and this is my take on it, and you're certainly welcome to speculate it on your own. The term light in Jewish thought is not just the kind of light that comes from a flame, or that comes from a bulb, or that comes from something that sheds physical light. We have light, for example, we say in the morning after Tachnun, we say, Achenu kol Yisrael and Sun Batzog Yishuda Ha'im Di Bein Bayam U'Bein Bayamosha Bayamosha Hamokim. Hashem should take us out mi'afela la'era, from darkness to light. Well, that's not talking about physical darkness and physical light. We're in Golus. We're at the mercy of nations who harbor a great deal of enmity against us. We're in darkness. There's all kinds of different forms of discrimination and hatred and persecution, so we're in darkness. Light means that we're not suffering from that kind of persecution and that kind of oppression. That's light. We also say during the davening, in the Birkas Kirishma, you, Hashem, are going to kindle a new light in Zion, and that's referring to Mashiach. Not referring to light, it's referring to Mashiach. You're going to kindle a new light in Zion. And we know that Torah is constantly Torah. Torah is light. Wisdom is light. But there's all kinds of metaphors and references for light. So if we look at light in a certain sense in Halach, there's stam light. There's light. Light that illuminates our physical world, tells us what we're looking at, where we're going, the things that appeal to us, the things that don't appeal to us, all the many things that the world of light exposes to us. That kind of light is sensory light. It's light going up against an object, being reflected back into our eyes, and what we see are appearances. It's a light it's an external light. It's a light of surface, of veneer. It's whatever the light is refracting against and coming back to our eyes, but it's all surface. Then there's the light of Torah. The light of Torah looks past the surface. It looks towards the moral and ethical core of our universe. It examines such things as right and wrong, good and bad, holy and profane. We look at our physical world, hopefully through a lens of Torah, and because we look through a lens of Torah, we try to identify not what we see as being the determinant for whether or not we're attracted to it or not attracted to it. We look with the eyes of what is the Ratzain of Hashem, what is Hashem's will regarding this thing. So in a certain sense, we're looking at the moral or immoral or ethical or unethical core of everything, and trying to respond in a manner which corresponds to Hashem's will. So in a certain sense, I suppose if we were to use a kind of a medical example, you can look at a patient and look at their skin and say, okay, I'll give you some salve to put on. But a doctor who knows what's going on the inside will look at a certain manifestation on the skin and say there's something else going on here. And we have to treat not what's appearing on the skin, we need to treat the disease that's underneath the skin. So the light of Torah is a substantive light. It's not a sensory light. It's a moral light. The Nerei Shabbos. The Nerei Shabbos are interesting in the fact that its purpose really is to illuminate our physical world. It's there for a tainug. It's there for us to be able to see the food on the table, to be able to appreciate it. It's there for us to be careful that we don't stumble on things in the darkness and hurt ourselves. And it's there for shalom bayis. If a person only has enough money, either to buy Neres Shabbos or Neres Chanukah, he's obligated to buy Neres Shabbos because Neres Shabbos is for shalom bayis, and shalom bayis takes precedence over everything. So, so Neres Shabbos is really unique in the sense that it's supposed to reveal the physical world, but we're told that Shabbos infuses a very special energy into our neshamas. We have a neshama yisera. Rashi says that means that we have a better appetite, but in a deeper sense, the power of Shabbos is that it enables us to deal with the physical world, to enjoy good food, to enjoy a good shluch, to enjoy the pleasures of Shabbos, the delicacies of Shabbos, and because we're doing these things because the Rebbeinu Shalom instructs us, he commands us to do it, the power of Shabbos is transformative. So it sublimates, it uplifts even the physical world and transforms it into spiritual energy. So that's a very unique property that Neros Shabbos have. They expose the physical world, but they're spiritual. The question is, what are Neros Chanukah? What are the Neros Chanukah supposed to be doing? So, to begin with, the challenge of Yom was that Yavon was very engrossed, very immersed in the physical world, its appearances. They were descendants of Yefes, one of the sons of Noach, whose very name means beauty. The Greeks were involved in beauty. They were involved in the physical appearances of the world. They were involved in art, and they were involved in statues and sculptures and painting and designs. They were involved in the Olympics, the glory of the physical body. The Greeks, in a certain sense, were perhaps the forerunners of modern science, because what they sought to do was in some way to address the physical world and make that the focus of life. So if you can figure out order in the physical world, if you can understand the laws of nature, that's all part of the world of Yovan, the world of Yefes. To concentrate on and indulge the world of beauty, the world of appearances, the external world. That's called Chachmais Chitzonios, the wisdoms of the outer world, the wisdom of a world of appearances, the world of externality, the superficial world. Torah emphasizes the very opposite. It says we can't be drawn in, we can't be intoxicated by the world of appearances. This is called an alma de shikra. It's a world of dissimulation, of falsehood, of impressing us with things that really aren't so, and we believe that some things are very attractive and therefore that they're good, when in reality they're not good for us. All kinds of situations which we think are profitable, in reality we're taking advantage of of others and perhaps profiting in ways that are unethical. The point is that the world of Greece, the world of Yavin, the Hellenistic world, was a world that was completely immersed in the externalities. And Torah came along and said, no, we have to look past the externalities, and we have to ask ourselves what's really going on beneath the surface. What are the moral and essential laws of our universe? So the menorah and the light of the menorah represents the light of Torah. And as such, it's the antidote, it's the counterforce to the light of the Hellenists. So there are two possible positions on that. One position is that the menorah of Hanukkah, the menorah that we celebrate, is really the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash. The menorah of the Beis HaMikdash stood opposite the Shulchan. There was this golden table that had the showbreads on them, the 12 showbreads, and the showbreads were on the north side of the Mishkan, the menorah was on the south side, and in a certain sense, the menorah was there to sanctify and hallow and transform the showbread from something that was physical and appealed to the appetites and was a question of belonging to a materialistic world, and say it doesn't need to be materialistic, it doesn't need to be physical. If we indulge, if we interact with bread, meaning all of the pleasures of the world, but we do it according to the Ratzon of Hashem, then it's something that illuminates the world. And the windows of the Beis HaMikdash were such that they were narrow on the inside and very, very wide on the outside. And the Chachamim tell us that the reason that they were made that way rather than the other way around, because it should have been, if you wanted to bring light in, so then it would be very expansive on the inside as opposed to being expansive on the outside. The point is that it wasn't to bring light into the Beis HaMikdash, it was to bring light out of the Beis HaMikdash. The menorah illuminated the world. It emanated from the Beis HaMikdash into the world with its message. Its message is that light belongs in the sanctuary. Light is, even the light that shines on the showbread, has the power of sanctifying our physical activities. So if that's the case, then the menorah and the lights of Hanukkah, if that's what we're celebrating, is the restoration of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, then we should be allowed to enjoy its light for our own personal reasons. We should be allowed to count money by that light. We should be allowed to read by that light, because the real purpose is that light is going to shine on our physical world and help us uplift and transform our physical world. So if we believe that is the logic of the menorah of Hanukkah, which is that was the menorah that was restored, that was the menorah on which there was the miracle of the lights, that's the menorah that we're trying to, in a certain sense, we're trying to celebrate that miracle with our own menorah. So in that case, we should be permitted to use the lights for our own personal, perhaps selfish reasons. The other position argues that the menorah that we kindle is really a response to the Greek philosophy. It's our answer to the Hellenistic obsession with the physical world. And that rather than have these lights be used for external purposes, that we should be looking into the light. That our relationship with these lights should be that we are looking into these lights to be inspired by them, to have our character uplifted and transformed. That we're supposed to be, in some way, using the menorah as our formula against what the Greeks represented, what the Hellenistic philosophy, and what, for that reason, don't use it for any selfish or personal purpose, because what you should be doing is first and foremost focusing on the fact that we are supposed to be bringing ourselves to the light rather than using it for some other external purpose, and to have that light by virtue of the way in which it changes us. Then we can go out and address the physical world. But so that position would say that we're not celebrating the menorah for reasons of the fact that it's affecting the showbread. We're celebrating the menorah because what we did when we fought for our faith was to fight for Chachmas Pnimiyos, to fight for the Eir of Torah, and therefore we should be looking into the Eir of Torah and not using it for any practical purpose. So if that's the case, then we are permitted to use it on Shabbos, because we're not permitted to examine anything by its light. And we have another issue of KSY. They're also disputing whether the issue of if a light that goes out, do you have to rekindle it? So, since one of the main features of the Hanukkah candles is Pirsume Niso, it's almost not understandable why anybody would say that if it goes out, you shouldn't rekindle it. That's Pirsume Niso. We're trying to disseminate and advertise the fact that there was a great miracle. The miracle of the war, the victory of the war itself, and the miracle of the lights. So, if that's the objective, then why would there ever be an argument about the fact that you should? Of course you should rekindle it. Now, I don't think that the position that says KSY in Zakukla is arguing that you can't do it, you could do it. Maybe they would agree that it's ideal to do it. But they say in Zakukla, and I would like to suggest that maybe they're saying don't. For the following reason. We readily understand the position that says if it goes out, rekindle it. Because the longer it burns, the fact that it's out there is delivering the message in a more extensive way. But perhaps one of the things that this position of Ein Zakukla is advocating is that we have the following premise, which can be found in all of the Sfarim, and that is that any single mitzvah contains all of the mitzvahs. And every single letter of the alphabet contains all the letters. To use, again, a kind of a medical metaphor, the geneticist will tell you that the DNA that's found in the little toe has the same formula, the same blueprint as the cells that are found in the brain. Basically, the plan for the human body is imprinted in every single cell of the body. And of course, the argument is that you could therefore, in a certain sense, you could recreate if we could grow these cells, you could take a cell from any place in the body, and it would differentiate into all of the different things that the body needs, because that's where the basic blueprint is. My take on a comment that the Maharal makes on in Pirkei Avos on mitzvah gereres mitzvah. One mitzvah causes another, drags you to do another. It kind of propels you in the direction of doing another mitzvah. The example that I used comes from the waiting room outside of the intensive care unit in hospitals. Invariably, when I would come to visit someone in intensive care, so you have to wait for a while till they admit you to the intensive care unit. In the waiting room, there's a table that has a puzzle on it. And families who are there and have to wait day after day, so they bring a puzzle, they start the puzzle, and people who come in are all kind of intrigued by the fact that there's a puzzle. So even when there's nobody there, they'll look into the puzzle, look into the box, and try to find pieces to add to the puzzle. And I found that when I would be in the room, in that waiting room, that I was busy looking at the puzzle, trying to see what the configuration and the colors and the lines, if I could find a piece to add to the puzzle. So I speculated why that was, and I think that one of the reasons that is because we like things that are whole. If we find something which is not whole, we want to make it whole. That's just a human proclivity. So if we see something that has a certain shape and certain colors, we're going to try to see if we can match that up with something that will make it more whole. And what the Maharal is suggesting is that when a person does one mitzvah, and that mitzvah has in it in a certain sense, the attraction of the whole puzzle. It has the whole picture in it. And when you do one mitzvah, the configuration of that mitzvah says there are more mitzvahs here that are going to make you whole. So find the mitzvahs that are in concert with this mitzvah so that you can continue to flesh out the whole picture. Mitzvah gereres mitzvah, one mitzvah gereres one, because in every single mitzvah there is all of the mitzvahs. And in every single letter there are all of the letters. So when we kindle the light, now we have, obviously, you can't, even if you're using inferior materials, but it has to be possible that it will burn the requisite amount of time. If it's not possible, for example, if you use an oil or a wick that can't last for a half hour, it's just not in its proper time, then you weren't yotze the mitzvah. That doesn't fall under the argument of Zakuk law. If you place your menorah in a place where there's a strong wind and the flame won't last more than a few minutes, you're not yotze because you put it in a place where it can't burn for a half hour. So you have to be able, in order to be yotze, you have to kindle it in a way in which it could satisfy the requirements of a Ner Chanukah. But once you've made the statement, once you are madlik the Ner, and with that hadlaka, you fulfill the mitzvah, then in that one, in a certain sense, in that one action lies the entire mitzvah. And even if for whatever reason the flame goes out, I'm not obligated, and perhaps I shouldn't even do it because the statement is that by doing the kindling, I fulfilled the mitzvah. The entire mitzvah lies in that one kindling. Maybe another way of saying it is that simply because the flame went out and I can't see it doesn't mean it's still burning, that it's not burning anymore. The fact that I have fulfilled the mitzvah and now physically it's no longer there, it's still burning. Because I did what I was supposed to do. And now, it's, in a certain sense, the Rabbi Michel takes our kavanah, he takes the conditions of our mitzvah. I fulfilled the mitzvah. The fact that it went out is a physical thing, not a spiritual thing. And so, KSY in Zog, I'm not obligated to, and maybe I shouldn't even do it, because if I do it again, I believe ideally we should rekindle it. But the point I'm making over here is that in the Hadlaka, there is a light that we kindle, which is a physical light and a spiritual light. And the spiritual light remains even after the physical light goes out. I think I've told the story here. My grandfather, the Zayvud of Motala, was one of the very towering figures of his time, was once visited by a secular Jew. And he, at the time, there was a very famous case of someone who was missing. A Jewish man was missing for many months, and subsequently a body washed up on the river many miles from where this person had lived. The people who found the body decided to give it over for burial to a Catholic cemetery. And later on they figured out that it was really this person who was missing, a Jewish man, and the family asked that they exhume the bodies so that they could bury it in a Jewish cemetery, and the Catholics refused. So it was like the fact that he came to burial in a Catholic cemetery was his salvation. So this secular Jew came to Zayvud HaMotlin and said to him, I'm not a religious man, I have no interest in being religious, but I want to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. He said, and I'm afraid that something could happen to me and they won't know that I'm Jewish, and I could end up in a non-Jewish cemetery. What can I do? So Zayvud HaMotlin said to him, here's my advice. Put on a talis kut. You can wear it under your clothes. Nobody will know that you're Jewish. Nobody will see it. But if you should ever be found someplace and nobody knows what religion you are by virtue of the fact that when they find you and under your clothes is a talis with artzitzis, they'll know that you're Jewish, so you won't. So he thought that was a great idea, and he put on a talis kut. The laws of the spiritual laws of the universe took hold, and it was mitzvah gereres, mitzvah, even though he didn't put it on for the right reason. And he became a Baal Tshuva. And one thing led to the next. In that one act was something that contained, in a certain sense, the whole Torah, and it moved him in that direction. So, one of the messages in KSY, Ein Zakuk Law, is that we should never minimize an act that we do, which we do because it's consistent with what we believe Hashem wants us to do. We may say, well, it's nothing, it doesn't mean too much, but anything, any single thing that we do, however we don't regard it as being any kind of major achievement, but in that tiny expression of commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu lies everything. And I think that KSY Ein Zakuk Law says, look at how the miracle occurred. It occurred with one little jug of oil, and that it lasted forever. And one little jug of mitzvah could be it went out, but it never goes out. In God's sight, it doesn't go out, and He carries it on, and He energizes us, and He moves us. So when we have an opportunity to do something which we consider insignificant, do it. It's our pach shemen, it's our little jug. And we will discover that even in those things that we consider insignificant lies an enormous power to carry us a very, very far distance. So Chanukah tells us two very important principles. It tells us that it's also lishtamish la'era. We need to approach, if we want to transform the world, we first have to transform ourselves. And to transform ourselves, we need to bring ourselves to the light, rather than using the light for any kind of utilitarian purposes, selfish purposes. So, don't, it's prohibited for us to use it. Just look at it. Look into the light. Let the light teach, let the light inspire, let the light inform, let the light transform. But once we are transformed, then we can address the world, and we can count our money in different ways, and we can eat our bread in different ways. So it's also l'shtam shloim. And kovsa ein zokum klal. A little bit goes a very, very long way, and if we've lit it in the right way, even if we don't see it burning anymore, it's still burning.